Hi, welcome to the Andrew Buckle book review of The Indestructible Man, Scott Goodall, Blasco, the Fleetway files, and it's from Hibernia, and it's part of obviously the Treasury of British Comics. They've got a connection as well, £10.49. However, this book comes from Ireland all the way over to the UK, and there's a little bit of a cost on postage, so be aware of that when you're purchasing it. Hopefully it's still in print. I am not certain. I know there's obviously a very limited supply, so quickly go over and check on their website and also their Facebook as well, so you can find out information. I think they've got some other ones coming up. I'm really looking forward to those as well. But it's a fairly thin book. However, it's obviously got all of the stories of the Indestructible Man. There was an earlier one. I don't know if this is still in print, so if you want this one, The Angry Planet, better check it. Quickly go and look and purchase it. So it's all walks like an Egyptian. It's quite weird actually when they do that, because reality, even though of course he was an Egyptian right at the start, there's very little about that. Now, if they were doing this in a modern time, I'm certain there'll be a whole load of development of the Egyptian idea. But it didn't. In this, there's very little. I mean, occasionally you see him like as an Egyptian, but that's it. Most time it's basically now, or 1960s. So it's very odd. But I'm certain they would have developed that more. Maybe you could have had like other characters who were from that period as well, who were also equally indestructible. That would have been interesting. They could have developed it far more. However, didn't really last about time, and there's got all the details there. And you also got a lovely introduction as well. The introduction is great. I love that. And the stories were from Jag magazine that I've never bought a copy of Jag. Issues 1 to 48. And you've got 1968 all the way through to 69, and also some annuals. And you can really tell the difference between the artwork as well. It changes massively. Now you've got real super sharp artwork. The artwork is just absolutely brilliant. Really crisp, really beautiful. The blacks, the white, just superb. Thoroughly enjoyable. But you go to the back, let's just go to the back one. You can really see the difference there. Obviously it's they're a lot more murky. Well, not murky, it's a rougher look. It's just not as good. They're from the annuals, but the ones from the comics are just absolutely brilliant. Now, the story's completely daft. He's basically Superman. He can do anything. For plot reasons, he seems to be able to develop special powers at any point. He can call on, and he's just suddenly, I can do that. I can do this. He can turn metal, gold into iron, iron into gold, and so on and so on. He can go through whatever. Anything that is useful at that point, he can do. And it's great. Thoroughly enjoyable. But obviously however, the one thing that they don't really develop too much, there's a bit of a connection with the British, they do sort of go to him and discuss things a bit, so he's sort of known kind of thing. But there's only, unfortunately, there's like Ned, his sort of butler, who sort of gets into the story. But beyond that, there's not really much development in terms of anyone else. Though I'm not certain why no one else knows about his identity. He doesn't really make any sort of secret, particularly. He sort of wanders around all over the place and gets involved. You'd think photos would have been all over the place showing him. So, however, maybe he's sort of like Professor X. He can alter everyone's mind, or Kilgrave or something, where he can change everyone to forget him or something. But he seems to be able to do everything, and he can do, like I say, gold. However, like Superman, he's got a weakness, not kryptonite. That would have been quite interesting if they had kryptonite. But what happens? He loses his he gets older very rapidly. It's a bit of a pain, that. Suddenly, it always happens again in a plot thing, right at the end, normally, on the virtually couple of panels, I'm getting old, kind of thing, and he suddenly turns into the oldest man alive. And he says, from time to time, immortality, etc., has to get to the flame. Renew yourself in flames. And conveniently, he's got a thing in his, you'd think he'd go around carrying lots of, and he's got his flames there in his, quite nice. That's quite handy to have. But you think he'd have lots of matches on him, and as well a little bottle of oil or something, so he can sort of like spread it home. Though I must admit, this was one thing that struck me. I think now back in the 60s they would have done all that sort of stuff, but they didn't probably worry so much. But now, I imagine there will be an outrage if you had a comic book character that, needs to burn himself to become sort of back to his normal self. Because crumbs, if any kids ever, that would have been terrible. So you can imagine but it's quite convenient because there's always like some petrol around, some fuel around, just so he can obviously get covered in. He comes out indestructible again. However, I always think that maybe he should have made a bit more effort to keep track of how many times he uses his various powers, and like work out a time. You know, if I use 3 or 4 times, then I suddenly lose my powers. So you get yourself prepared. But then that would spoil the story, wouldn't it? But the villains are all pretty naff sort of thing. They're all sort of ridiculous villains that come out of the standard school book of British comic villains from the 60s. They're all just got ones on helicopters floating around, and they do stupid things they want to control the country kind of thing. Really? Who wants to do that? I can't think of it. I've never understood. I want to rule Britain. Really? What a waste of time. What a waste of time. Really? And so anyway, this guy pops up out, he just jumped. So they've always got, I don't know how he does that. That was pretty amazing for he just flies on his helicopter, he bursts through the ground. I mean, surely that would have damaged the blades a bit. But anyway, what do I know about this? However, he can also, he's got lots of skills. He can read various things, various formula and stuff he can work out. But it's just great. And also he freezes himself at one point just so he can avoid getting too old very quickly. But it's pretty good all the way through the story. And again, you got some really... And the villains are all absolutely hopeless most of the time. But I did love to say, the ones that want to rule the country, you think. But then they always do it because they want to get the money or something. And you think to yourself, really? Is that... What? What a pointless exercise that. Is that... Oh, you got the Badger as well, this guy. And he's got a nice twist as well in that storyline. All the way through, this is just a great story. I know I'm slightly being a bit, what's the name, but it's just, there's just great scene. This one, he's been in a sort of, all the various characters he faces. But what a great story. And then, unfortunately, like I say, it changes. And it is a pity, because, of course, the series just suddenly ended. And it actually says here, last page, I'm not going to show the last page. And you just got him, and Jag joins Tiger next week to make one super paper. Apparently Jag was quite maybe not that big, but it was quite a big one, sort of like it was a much bigger sort of comic book than normal, because most of the comic books were more this sort of size kind of thing, maybe a bit even smaller. But this one was a special one, apparently Jag. But I never saw it, I must admit. But it was 1968, maybe I wasn't just, it was probably Marvel Comics, I suppose. But you got the annuals, they look terrible. And the stories are pretty down. I always think annuals always never fit in well with the rest of the stories. Quite often there's sequences you think, that's odd, because they never did it in the comic. Then suddenly the annual just changes the storyline completely. But these were a few years afterwards, 1971. So now I don't know if the stories or scripts or whatever have been round for a bit longer, or if they just suddenly thought, you know what, we must do a Jag annual and those things. However, at the back you've got the thing there, obviously all the details of various writers, artists, etc. And the only issue I have with this thing, and slightly, I wonder how well it's going to survive. It's glued there. I hope it's okay. However, I notice every time I open it, it creaks a bit like me. But however, also another issue with it, it's got a lot of bit of wear there. And I had that when it came. It wasn't something I've just, that was straight away. I noticed that, and I thought, Now, I don't know, and I noticed, yes, see, it's got it here as well. They're quite rough on the edge around there, which is, no big deal, but particularly, I noticed it just then, number 2, it says, and this one is number 1. So clearly it is going to be a series of books. So don't slightly confuse in the sense if you come to this thinking, that's going to be volume 2, especially if you think there's going to be a volume 3, 4, 5, etc. of these ones, but still it says 2 there. I think it's great. I love it, and I'm really glad I got it. So it's, and I would suggest you check it out very quickly if you want to get this. And I definitely recommend. You'll love the story. I think the Indestructible Man is just. I love that he's even got powers of blast electricity. And he's got every power under the sun. No wonder he runs out of power. And that's actually one thing when I was walking along, I was thinking about this story, and I was thinking, you know what they could have done. They could have had a story where he was in space, of course, and then he wouldn't be able to have a flame. So then he would sort of that would be it. However, he would float off, maybe dragged into the sun, and then, of course, he comes to get back to life again. And then, of course, he'd be indestructible again, so he could come back. And then, of course, he'd be 3,000 or 4,000 years in the future. And they could have done a science fiction story with him in the future. That would have been brilliant. Anyway, that was just my quick throwaway story. No one will ever do, but it would have been a brilliant story if they had done that one. But I loved this one. Indestructible Man, brilliant. Totally recommended. Great little series. Hope they continue bringing out these books because they're just superb.